We're going to get started here. I want to introduce you guys to a friend of mine, Dr. Bob Beare. And I met Bob actually doing what he and I both love to do. We were out there hitting golf balls.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just intrigued by the work that he does and the way that the work he does helps to transform young men. And I'm really excited to have him here today. I've had the pleasure of going on his Deep Waters podcast and being a guest there, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. And so you guys are in for a real treat today. If you have a question for Bob, you can put it in the question and answer section, and he'll definitely get to that. Ask there. If you have a technical issue or a question about anything regarding the conference, you can put that in the chat window, and Dave or myself will get to that. But any questions for Bob, you can put in the question and answer. And with that, that's enough out of me. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bob Beare. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Do I need to share my screen to get my PowerPoint up there?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Look at that.
Hey.
All right, folks. I'm taking a breath. Maybe, I don't know if anybody's breathed today. Anybody take any oxygen yet today? So I want to thank you, Glenn. I think Glenn was chasing a car and caught the bumper, and now what's he going to do with it? This is like a massive undertaking, and so honored to be part of this. Dave, thanks for your help. Nicole is on here too. She's the program manager of Deep Waters Recovery, and she'll be fielding questions and maybe sending you guys info that you might need related to this conversation that we're going to have. Yep, I'm Dr. Bob Beare. I'm the CEO and director of Deep Waters Recovery Programs and Recovery Network, also Creative Life Institute. The Deep Waters is an outpatient program right now and soon to be a inpatient program. And actually, the presentation today will cover kind of the philosophy that's under the work that we do. I also want to just let you know that I'm a little nervous here, but I'm also in cargo shorts and what are these things called? Crocs. I'm in Crocs. And it occurred to me that one of the things that we're encouraged to do when we have nerves when we're presenting is to think of people being naked or in their underwear. And I am absolutely certain that there are people out there right now in your underwear. So this is like the real deal. I don't even have to visualize it. So that's a little intro to, I'm hopeful we can have a little fun here today. You know, there's a disaster happening right now, and I'm sending love to anybody who's really in the midst of that, in the fear or in the sickness or have lost people. I mean, I'm in no way going to make light of any of that. I'd like us to find a way to have some joy and also have our grief together, possibly. Who knows what'll happen here. Yeah. So what else? We also have a podcast called The Recovery Crew. You can go on deepwatersrecovery.com. Has a lot of interesting stuff. If you don't get sick of listening to my voice in the next hour or so, there's lots of other opportunities. We do a fun podcast on recovery, trauma, and finding meaning in life. So let's see, what's next? One of the things, this presentation, I was looking forward to going to San Diego and playing golf with Glenn, but also doing this experiential program. I'm experiential facilitator. And so this is an adaptation here. I'm going to try to do a couple of experiential things, but for the most part, it's going to be through this screen. But I also do promise you some controversial stuff, especially in the industry community. I told Glenn, yep, there might be a little bracing. Somebody might have to brace themselves here, but you know, we're trying to do some cutting edge stuff at Deep Waters Recovery. And of course, there's going to be moments that are, that there's going to be conversations. So I'm just throwing that out there. All right, so moving on here. Essentially what we're going to be talking about is three topics: recovery, healing, and launching into life. Those are that's kind of our moniker: recover, heal, launch. For us, trauma resolution is relapse prevention. Underneath, once we get some recovery, if we don't heal the trauma underneath, it is, we call it restless, irritable, and discontent. If we don't deal with that, it's a big factor in relapse, in my experience. I'm taking one of those breaths right now. That's what we say at the breath. I also run the Braveheart experience at the Last Resort Treatment Center in Central Texas here. And we say that throughout the entire weekend. Take a breath, take a breath, take a breath. Those of us that have been hurt, which is most of us, those of us that have trauma, which is most of us or all of us, have learned how to not breathe. And I tell those guys, if you don't learn anything at this weekend, you're going to learn how to breathe. So maybe we could breathe together. I have this that my daughter said it was too condescending to put up behind the screen, but telling people to breathe just breathe. But I'm going to invite us all to breathe from now until the end of our life. How about that? So let's start with this. Let's start with the recovery topic. A little bit of history. There might be some folks here that are big book scholars. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, who might say he's full of crap. You didn't get that right. There might be some other folks that don't know much about it. This might be a little bit interesting. The history of community-based recovery, and then we'll talk a little bit about the problem and a possible solution. So here's how it didn't work. For many centuries, they've been hitting people on the side of the head with a 2x4, either literally or metaphorically or religiously or more morally, to try to get them to stop doing that crazy behavior, right? Then things like putting insects and worms and syrups in creating, with the induced vomiting, which is probably the early version of antabuse, worms and insects. And then there was the Keeley method, which was daily injections of bichloride and strychnine. And apparently they did some research on that, and a few guys stayed sober a couple of days, and probably because of the placebo effect more than anything else. People have used shock treatment, aversion therapy, saturating an alcoholic's clothes with alcohol, and putting it in their food and everything. But anybody that's been around long enough to know that a good alcoholic will take his socks and squeeze the alcohol out and drink it. It's like it's tricky to get a person that has that disease to use that substance to try to get them off that substance. Many forms of punishment, physical and religious. And in the early 20th century, I just read this recently, they threatened women with sterilization. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so frontal lobotomies. Now that one probably works. If you cut out enough of the brain, you might get them to stop drinking. But I don't think the quality of life is probably, in other words, we've tried everything. So, it began to work in the early part of the 20th century. The Oxford group was a group of folks. It was a very religious outfit, too religious for most of the folks that come into 12-step recovery, although there's some folks that are looking for that. But for the most part, we all come in with some kind of a wound around trusting anything, including something spiritual. But the Oxford group was pretty religious. And this guy, Frank Buckman, found that, but he was really up to trying to transform culture with that group. And this guy named Roland Hazard was part of that group, and he was a bad alcoholic, and he went over to see, he was a little rich boy, I think, and he tried everything, paid for everything, traveled everywhere, and finally found Dr. Carl Jung. At the time, he was like the best psychiatrist on the planet. And so he worked with Jung for a while, and Jung told him, and this is the pivotal piece. Jung told him, "You're hopeless. You have no chance of recovering. I've never seen anybody like you recover." And it was just so devastating to this guy. that he left the office, and actually then he had an encounter with Bill Wilson, and it was very formative in the beginning of AA. That incredible pain of hopelessness is what we call powerlessness, and taking a look at the unmanageability in our lives is like where we get started, right? So, Bill Wilson had some interaction with Dr. Jung, and was quoted in a letter saying that Dr. Jung's philosophy is the foundation stone of AA. So we can really, if anybody has done a lot of work studying 12-step recovery and Dr. Jung's work, which is vast and dense, unless you're a Jungian analyst, you probably have not read his collected works because it is massive. But, I think 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, we really should have listened to Jung, because the answer is in the soul. It's really, we're not going to get it out of this 1% of our mind that has consciousness. But I also think the 12-step recovery is the popular manifestation of Jung's work. But all right, enough on that. Maybe how it began to work. Now, one of the things I like to talk about or say is that it really doesn't work for anybody. 12-step recovery does not work for anybody. Anybody who's been around there long enough, it's a little bit of a joke when somebody says AA didn't work for me, because it doesn't work for anybody. It works for 100% of the folks that actually work it, and it is a lot of work. I'm not saying it's not a magic pill. It is a lot of work and a lot of self discovery that's required, and it's true. Some of us just aren't ready for it or won't do it, or I didn't want to do it till I was 35, and it's a daily operation. It's not a one-time thing. But a couple of great studies came out this year. I was so grateful to see them. These are both the study at Brown University and Stanford University kind of came up with the same conclusion, and these are meta-analyses. They're peer-reviewed, rigorous studies of other studies, and concluded that there's really nothing more effective than 12-step recovery. And after reading so many articles that may or may not have been quite as rigorous, it's been fairly satisfying to a lot of us who have been somewhat quietly speaking to this. It's like those of us that know how it works, it's like, you're not going to get anybody to understand it unless you kind of experience it yourself. But anyway, so there's a couple of studies if anybody wants to dig into that. So what we do at Deep Waters Recovery is try to find this place between the clinical models and the community-based models. But there's a lot of models that focus on what's wrong, to try and fix it. Medicaid's a very Western way of thinking. Let's surgically remove it, or think it out, find some kind of a cognitive intervention that will change it. So, in itself, those interventions are not strong enough. I'd like to propose that addiction gets down into the deepest part. There's a guy named David Shurn. He's a Jungian analyst in New Orleans, who wrote a book called, let's see if I can think of it. The War of the Gods in Addiction. Is really strong stuff. And he really points at how the behaviors that we do when we're in our addiction look a lot like evil. And that is not my world. It's not my expertise, but those of you that are into archetypal psychology and the overlap with religion, that's a worthy thing to look at. We look at what these really quality human beings do while they're under the influence of addiction, looks as much like evil as anything else. So whether we like it or not, it's beyond science. It's not really measurable. And those of us that like to think we're pretty smart don't like things that we can't measure, right? We got to get a yardstick out. And this, it tends to confound the scientific clinical mind. And that's, you notice that those of you that have been in graduate school for psychology, almost all graduate programs, you'll notice that Jung's psychology gets pretty short shrift. There's not a whole lot of time spent on it, mostly because the professor really needs to do some of his own work to even be able to present it. And you know, feelings don't, in academia, if there's a feeling that gets loose in the hallway, there's somebody with a broom trying to extinguish it. So, you know, I hate to use the S word. It's a very controversial word, maybe not with this crowd, but it takes some kind of a spiritual transformation. One addict to another. It's the only sustainable and reliable intervention. Not to say that all the other interventions aren't of use, of value, but for the sustainable long-term, the results are in. It takes another alcoholic, another love addict, another gambling addict, another food addict, another screen addict to help another addict. So, all right. And so that's my segue to, it's bigger than alcohol. Let's see, is my time up? Nope. I can keep talking for a little while. I'm going to get you guys involved here in a minute, but I want to get some of this out. So it's bigger than alcohol. 67,000. I think these are 2017 statistics. Maybe some of you statistics folks will, these might be slightly off, but 67,000 alcohol deaths a year, 72,000 overdose deaths. These are getting a lot of press. We're putting a lot of attention on those. I think there's a couple of other problems that I'd like to bring onto the screen a little more vividly. 47,000 suicides. And why would I be talking about that in an addiction presentation? Well, we'll get to it in a moment. And maybe even more relevant, 2.8 million obesity-related deaths a year. All right, so I'm taking another breath. This is actually the one that got me into recovery 30 years ago, love addiction. There's a study at UT, University of Texas, in 2015. They interviewed, I don't know, it was a pretty rigorous study, and they're graduate students. So that piece of it, it's not the full population, but they asked them a variety of questions. One of them was, what was the thing that pushed you over the edge for suicide? More than half of them said emotional or physical pain, and more than half of them said also relationship problems. And they did not distinguish what the emotional, in that first one, emotional and physical pain, what the emotions were. I suspect some of that had to do with relational issues as well. The point being, some kind of a breakup, a relationship, a romantic breakup, or a relationship loss was what made a person try to kill themselves. To me, and for the people that were successful, that did not get charted as love addiction. It got charted as depression or something else. So it's not being treated as an addiction. Love, is good, and love is lethal. I just made that up. I don't know if that's too controversial, or maybe it's just really catchy, but it has been lethal, almost lethal for me. Pia Melody, who worked out of the Meadows in Wickenburg, Arizona for a long time. There's a lot of great stuff. Actually, half of my stuff comes originally out of that work that started in the 90s there. But she wrote a book called Facing Codependency, which to me is the go-to book on that topic. And then subsequently she wrote Facing Love Addiction. And she refers to love addiction as advanced codependency. And so, I don't know that there's a few treatment centers that are really focused on working on love addiction. I know, I can't remember the presentation that was given, the detox one a couple of days ago, but I know that they're really on it. In California, they have a 12-step program, LAA, Love Addicts Anonymous. For the rest of us, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous is the program of choice, but we really need to bring it more fully into the treatment world. That's my point. All right, and here's the big one. 3 million people are dropping dead from obesity-related disorders, right? So, and $60 billion being spent on diets. Most of obesity is due to an addiction called food addiction. And, you know, I know that's controversial for the eating disorder folks. I've actually had these conversations. This is just my perspective. It does come from quite a bit of experience, but I know there's other perspectives. These disorders, these deaths are not being charted as died due to untreated food addiction. It's because of heart disease or something else. And this is something else that I'm just suggesting we take a look at as treatment professionals, that this is a thing and there is a solution, and it's the same solution. You know, the program Food Addicts Anonymous, Food Addicts in Recovery, is a program that's really treating. It's pretty rigid outfit. When people first go there, it's weighing and measuring food. Oh my God. And I don't want to turn anybody off, but it is really a doorway to freedom. It has been for me. I'm a little off my program right now, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But there is a solution, and I'm grateful for it. Yeah, all right. So the dilemma, maybe it's beyond human aid. Maybe our egos, the therapist in me that's been doing this for so long, that thinks I have a solution for this, is maybe it's a little bit exaggerated. Maybe we have to find ways to help ourselves and our clients find a spiritual cure. That's the point. I just want us to be with, maybe not slam into a decision about it one way or another. Wow, did I gobble up an hour already? All right, so I'm going to skip this. I'm going to do a little workshop here pretty soon on there's a Gestalt process called What's at Risk. We call it the dilemma at the Braveheart experience. It's an opportunity. It's a Gestalt process that takes us into that place of the dilemma in us, that uncomfortable dilemma that we get in and keeps us stuck. Anybody's interested in that, you can reach out. Nicole is on here, and if anybody wants more information about our website and that kind of stuff, Nicole will put that up at some point, and it's also at the end of the PowerPoint. I'll make sure you guys have access to Nicole, me, the program, the Braveheart experience, the Recovery Crew podcast, Deep Waters Recovery. All right, so that's that. I'm going to move on to dun dun dun. All right. I don't have a sound effects guide, so I have to do it myself. Trauma resolution is relapse prevention. It's not just part of relapse prevention. And I'm going to make a little bit of pitch. I work with substance abuse counselors, and I've also been recently working with a lot of Christian counselors and trying to think of the group. There's folks that are doing healing work in churches, the Stevens Ministry folks. So both of these outfits, both of these groups of folks are told in their training that they can't deal with mental health issues. This is an ongoing scope of practice topic. And I'm saying especially here to the folks that are licensed chemical dependency counselors and have been trained that not to do anything that goes into the scope of practice of mental health. I'm saying trauma is part of relapse prevention. And if it is step number one, do your own relapse, do your own trauma work. And step two, hold loving, kind, informed space for your clients to do trauma resolution work. So I'm putting that out there. I know it's mildly controversial, but my experience is if you do your own trauma work, you are going to naturally be holding space for folks to do that. All right. So we're going to come at this from two different angles. The trauma conversation, we're going to come up from top down and bottom up. All of us who are therapist types or are in recovery, dealing with sponsees or just dealing with humans or just dealing with ourselves have to deal with this thing called negative self-talk, which just whether I'm saying I'm stupid or I'm not, I'm not enough, whatever the negative self-talk is, we all have our version of it. The point being, it comes from somewhere. It just didn't emerge, right? We didn't come into this world as infants with these messages. It comes from somewhere. Negative self-talk comes from judgment, which is usually driven by some kind of a resentment. there's a resentment that is cooking, and I have to do something with it. What can I do with it except judge either someone else or judge myself? It's like in the men's work, we call it the warrior. The warrior in us either has to take the sword out when the immature warrior has to stab someone else psychologically or stab ourselves, which also known as depression, right? And resentment comes out of fear, right? When I'm feeling fear, I can't hold on to it for very long. I got to do something with it. So it turns into blaming, right? And then it turns into judgment, negative self-talk. Where does fear come from? Fear comes from shame. Shame is that big glob of unknown repressed feelings that are cooking deep inside of me, and I have to do something with it. And what I'm doing is trying to protect myself from having any more shame, also known as fear. So keeping people and everyone away, or in many different ways. And shame is the main byproduct of unresolved trauma. So that's kind of from the top down look at trauma. All right, so I'm going to put that out there. We're going to do a little process here together. I wonder if anybody would like to just put a word or two out there. What do we really mean when we say trauma? Are we using the Q&A? Yeah.
We also have a few questions, Bob, if you want to.
All right, I'll take a pause and answer a couple of questions. What can you say about dual diagnosis patients and clients? There's a couple of different definitions of dual diagnosis. All people with addiction have another, have trauma in my experience. So therefore they're dual diagnosis. And then if we're talking about another population of folks that have psychotic disorders in addition with addiction, the program kind of lays it out as anybody can recover if they have the ability to be honest. I know there's some folks that have we know that there's some folks that absolutely have to be on medications to function. So that's my short answer. Somebody wrote trauma equals unresolved pain. Bingo, ding, ding, ding. And then one more question. In your opinion, after all of this studies and experience, do you think or believe addiction is a sickness, or is it a personality trait or weakness? I believe it's a disease, and whether it is or not, it is a model that works, because then you can move into the solution. All right. Anybody else want to say anything about trauma? It's like, okay, somebody wrote, it's like adding a period to a sentence that was still running, and now the sentence has changed completely. Right, it completely changes everything so we were going in a particular direction. The trauma happened, it put us on a different path, and depending on how long we go and the trajectory continues, we are so far off our authentic path that it's really hard to get back on. But I want to do this, I'm going to do this quickly. This next process is something that I do with large groups and small groups. I get people on their feet and they play these roles. It's kind of a psychodrama, sociometric process. But you can also do it just with this PowerPoint if you want to. You can take this afterwards and use it with your clients. For me, it is the very best way to explain what trauma is. Because I think even a lot of us in this industry have a limited idea of what it is. And if we can expand it, we can help heal it. So what's the main thing people think of when we think of trauma? What's the one word? Anybody want to throw it out there? The one word that people think of when they think of trauma. Pain, 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 pain. Yep, agreed. And just because I could have put that there, but abuse is the word. A lot of times people are thinking that is the only thing that trauma is, right? And abuse is a major part of this, and physical, sexual, emotional. It can also be psychological, verbal, religious. There's lots of different, the distinction about abuse. And if I was in a group and we had more time, I'd let you guys do this, but I know what you would say is that it's violent. There's some kind of a violent or an intrusion. The other thing that we think of when we think of trauma is critical incidents. Usually abuse is what I think of it from 0 to 10 years old. That's when we're most like a sponge. Everything goes in and stays. Later in life, we can have abuse, of course, but also just for our purposes, let's talk about it as critical incidents. And what are some critical incidents? War is one, yeah. Car accidents, divorce, suicide. Oops, I just lost my screen. Sorry, folks. So this is what PTSD essentially. That's the diagnosis that we're talking about here, and we'll talk about EMDR as an intervention for that in a moment. But I already got ahead of myself here. So abuse and critical incidents are the two things in popular culture. That's what we think of. And the only thing that people have, the only advantage you have or your clients have if they have abuse and critical incidents is that they can see their abuse, right? They can see their trauma. It's pretty obvious. For some of these other ones, it's a little more subtle. And we do this other thing where we ask the crowd, who here is from a good family? And I'm asking all of you that, and you can all raise your hands or not if you want. We all are from, there is some love in there somewhere, right? And some of us were from great families, all that. I was from the best family. All of my friends came over to my house and said, the Bears, oh man, let's go over there. The best family of all. They were loving and kind and caring and extremely codependent. And it took me 35 years to see that there was way more dysfunction in there than I could possibly see. My ex-wife just kind of shook her head, said, Bob, your mom cannot have a key to our house to come in and go. And I was very offended by that. Anyway, that's just one of the many stories. So it was a little harder for me to see because I did not have abuse and critical incidents. That's the long way to say that. Another form of trauma is abandonment. And if we're from an alcoholic or dysfunctional family, we were abandoned, either emotionally or physically. You know, in the groups that we do, I ask the guys, any of you guys fathers, any of you women mothers, and how available were you to your kids when you were using or when you were acting out? And they all say, not very. It's an abandonment. Now that wasn't necessarily intentional. Some of trauma is not intentional. It's but we have to look at it, even though you know it does. The other point that I want to make is that trauma does not cause addiction. That is a really bad road to get on because you're not going to fix your addiction by working on your trauma. You have to work on the spiritual stuff. But the point is, you do have to look at it though, because it's relapse prevention. So abandonment is another one. Very closely related is neglect, food, shelter. When a little kid from 0 to 10 doesn't say, okay, you know, I'm a little hungry, I'm going to go get a hamburger. It's a kid says, I might die here, right? And you know, if we move if there was dysfunction, there was a lot moving to 20 different houses. That was probably not, there's probably a neglect experience, but I don't mean neglect in a blaming kind of a way. It's just for a kid, those kind of things rattle the cage and create trauma. And we could, if we had more time, we'd spend more time on this, but I'm getting through it fairly quickly here. Although it may not seem like it. And here's the big one, enmeshment. This is the most underreported, acknowledged enmeshment. What are some forms of enmeshment? I'd like some help with this. I'm going to tell my little piece, which is my mom marched into the school many times to bail me out of trouble. I never had any consequences, but she wasn't really doing it for me. She was doing it because she was uncomfortable. And in the addiction world, this happens a lot. We all take on different roles to try to protect each other or blame each other. And for little kids that are having to grow up and take care of a parent who's acting out, it's an issue. Let's see, how did I get this in such a big screen? Okay. Yeah, any other examples of enmeshment, family enmeshment? Anybody wants to throw out there? And what happens is the childhood gets co-opted. The natural development of the child is arrested.
Looks like someone said hovering parents and enablers.
Say it again.
Someone said hovering parents, enablers, enmeshment. One cannot differentiate where one begins and another ends, not being able to form identity separate from family of origin. Mom needs emotional support because if dad isn't available. A child that's parentified.
Wow, thank you. I'm not seeing
Chat
all of
box
that.
stuff.
Helicopter parents. Yeah, and thank you, Nicole. For some reason, I think some people are going in the chat and some people are going to the Q&A, but I'll let you do the reading. That's excellent. All right, so what is, so here's the roots of the tree, of the trauma tree. And the main byproduct of these roots is shame. We walk around the world, little kids do not say, gee, dad and mom could really use a therapist. No, they say, it's my fault, right? Little kids think, and it's what it's supposed to be. It's their world. The whole world is them. Any of this stuff that happens goes in the body, gets lodged there, and we think that we've created all of this, and then it creates a lot of negative self-talk and gets us on the path that in a lot of times, some of the medicating that we started doing may be as trying to medicate this shame. And so what is trauma create? What are the leaves of the tree? What comes out of the shame? Addiction. I'm going to fast forward this. And Nicole, if you want to add things, go ahead, but I'm just going to addiction, anger.
Yeah, someone said, sorry, still back to the abuse. Someone who said running a family business to take priority over family. That's another big one.
That's right. It's an
Asking
abandonment.
kids to keep
It's an
secrets.
abandonment issue.
Mm-hmm. So someone saying self-harm.
Right. Self-harm could be up in the tree. That is, of course. So what we do, I do this in big groups, and we do it and go on, and we write it on pieces of paper, and we fill out the tree, and we always just stop. Eventually we have to just stop and say we could fill up 4 rooms full of this about what comes out of trauma. And so hopefully it will be useful for some of you personally, professionally, and hopefully you'll use it with your clients. It's a really good way to begin the conversation. So if trauma is a major relapse trigger, hopefully I've made a case for that, whether we've all signed off on it or not, I don't know. But if it is, and if it's at the root of most emotional and relationship problems, don't we have to give it some focus and treatment? Shouldn't it be a major focus and treatment? I'm just throwing that out there. All right, so can we just talk it out? Talking is good, but once we do it for a while, then we got to figure out where is it and how can we deal with it? And trauma is lodged in the body. That's where it is. So we've got to get into action somehow. EMDR, apparently a lot of this trauma gets stuck in our short-term memory, and we're constantly waiting for the next bad thing to happen. Right? EMDR helps the short-term memory go into long-term memory so that we can function. Somatic experiencing is another way to take the talking into the body. Powerful intervention. Holotropic breath work is a self-directed, powerful way to get into the trauma in the body and discharge it. I call it coughing up the hairballs, the trauma hairballs, and releasing them. Bioenergetics, Alexander Lowen was a student of Wilhelm Reich's, and it's a vast process. We use it at the little pieces of it, the Braveheart experience. Psychodrama, I'm a psychodramatist, and I am, to me, it is the go-to healing of trauma technique, and I'm just gonna leave it there. Moreno said, don't tell me, show me. And carpal work and shadow work are amalgamations of all of these different processes. We use a combination of them at the Braveheart Experience and the Deep Waters Intensives. I was going to do an Enneagram interlude, but I think I'm kind of going over time here. Suffice to say that the Enneagram personality test is a great other doorway to looking at trauma, because once you take one of the tests, and apparently the tests are, the Enneagram is now a popular thing. I want to say that I was an Enneagram guy before Enneagram was cool.
Hey, Bob, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, someone answered. Never mind. Someone was asking about the breath work thing that you mentioned, but someone answered holotropic breath work.
Right.
And just confirming that the slides will be available for everyone to.
Yeah, and you can Google that. And if you want to talk to the couple of experts here in Austin, Texas, one of them is Christine Calvert. You can Google her, Calvert. And the other one is Brenda Gauthier, Gauthier. I'm not a breathwork guy, but I do that work and for myself, very powerful stuff. But the Enneagram is a doorway for folks to have fun looking at themselves. It breaks down denial. And the Enneagram really points to the mask that we've created from our trauma. I was going to play some music with this, but I am going to play a song, and if whoever writes in and knows what this is, we'll send you one of my books. All right, ready? Here we go. All right. Are you watching, Nicole?
It looks like a
Curb. Somebody said Curb.
Yeah.
Marissa Friedman is the winner. Okay, that's the theme song from Curb Your Enthusiasm. That was going to be our interlude for the Enneagram thing. I do have a little fun thing that's about how each Enneagram type responds to disasters like we're in right now. It's probably maybe a little too lighthearted or whatever, but if you want that, let Nicole know and we'll get that out to you. Yeah.
David's saying you have time if you want to keep on going.
All right. Yeah, but if I do that whole thing, I won't be able to do this other. Oh, it's 12:18. Okay, I'm good. Actually, I think I will. I'm going to do the short version of the Enneagram interlude. Thanks. All right, there we go. Okay, so each of the types, hopefully there's a few of you out there who have taken the tests. The tests for the Enneagram are not conclusive. If you want to take the best one, it's probably the one that you have to pay for on the Riso Hudson website, the Ready, R-H-E-T-T-I, the Riso Hudson Institute. Maybe you can search that, Nicole, and put that out there. But here's another way. In a disaster, if you are an Enneagram 1, the reformer or the achiever, you probably made a bunch of lists, but haven't gotten to it because you had to get the list perfect, right? List about what to buy or what to purchase in a disaster. If you have been extremely worried about everyone else to your own detriment, to your own not taking care of yourself, you're probably a number 2, the helper. A lot of us therapist types have some 2. If you want to make sure that everyone knows that now 3, I call them the achievers. Here on here they call it the performer. But if you're very interested in wanting to appear prepared, you want to make sure see, Enneagram 3s are really interested in the external. But you want to be respected for the fact that you're not worried. So all I'm doing is asking you to kind of see, do you have any of this? It's like a doorway to it's just a little added way to see the types. Or if you know somebody like this. Number 4s are the artists and the gothic, dark, meaningful, different than everyone else folks. the individualists, and that they have interest. They want to make sure they don't, whenever I'm doing a group, Enneagram 4s are always sitting just outside the group. They're never part of the group. And actually in this thing that I'm presented, that was sent to me, it's the 4s want to make sure that they don't catch a disease or anything else that anybody else has. They want to be different. So now Enneagram 5s are pretty easy to spot in a disaster. Those are the folks that have been sending you endless reports and studies and are absolute experts on viruses right now. Enneagram 5s are the investigators and will dig deeply, right? To their own detriment sometimes. They forget to live their life. Enneagram 6, my brother is an Enneagram 6, and he is washing every last piece of fruit down to the, nothing comes anywhere near the house. They're the loyalists. They're always, if it gets any worse, I want a guy like that around me, because he's also got, a lot of locks on the doors. He's always making sure things are, this thing says they buy 150 pounds of dried green beans while wearing a gas mask. I don't know. And say, I knew it all the time. I knew it was coming. This is Enneagram 6. 7s, I'm a 7. I have to admit, I'm a 7. I didn't want to be a 7. 7s are always putting on a show. Here I am putting on a show. Sometimes we gain some pretty good skills from our personas that we've created out of our trauma. I had to be on, I was a little Bobby putting on a show for the dysfunctional family as a kid. I learned how to do that. But sometimes I don't get what I want, because underneath there are a lot of emotions that are not being expressed because of that. Now 7s, I have to admit this, when this thing started, I thought about getting a cheap cruise, and I'm letting you know that I'm not thinking about that anymore. It's not on my plate, but I do have to admit that it came to my mind. All right. Enneagram 8s do not want to be told what to do. They're running the world. They don't want to be told what to do by anybody, including the CDC. So I'll just leave that there. And number 9, Enneagram 9s are the nice peacemakers, but they always got a little resentment working underneath the surface. And they can't figure out what to do most of the time. They don't know whether to be worried about all this or not. So, and they take a nap a lot. That's an intro. That's sort of the Enneagram interlude. I use this with clients a lot because it's somewhat of a playful way to look at deeper issues. I don't know if I presented it in a way that shows that here or not, but all right, that was the Enneagram interlude, and we do have a winner. The person that identified the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song, Larry David for President. All right. All right, anything else going on out there, Nicole? What I've been blathering on here?
Someone wanted definitions for each of the Enneagrams. I will type that in here, but we'll also share some links when we send out the follow-up email in 24 hours.
The Enneagram Institute website, they have descriptions for all the types. It's really the best resource.
That link in there now.
All right, so launching is the third part of the philosophy that we that underpins all of the work that we do at Deep Waters. So now we've got a client or ourselves. We've got some recovery. We're going to meetings or of whatever type that work for us to get that spiritual thing rolling, to get beyond the I've got the solution. I've got to make a connection with people and be helping other people and getting help myself. So let's say we've got that rolling. And now we've found a place to really do some of the trauma work, right? We're getting we're offloading some of the pain that we've been dragging around that got handed to us, maybe not intentionally, but we're still carrying it. And we found we're either doing EMDR or somatic experiencing or psychodrama or breath work, or I want to throw a pitch out there, for there aren't very many people doing this work in treatment. Now, you guys can correct me if you want, but you know, the Last Resort Treatment Center is focused on it, and that's why we do the Braveheart experience out there. That's one place. Another place, and give a shout out to the Bridge to Recovery in Bowling Green, Kentucky. If you want to go take a couple of weeks and do some really intense work, they're doing the deal. So throwing that out there. I've stolen a few things from them here on this podcast, so that's the least I can do, or on this webinar. So we've got some recovery, we've got some healing. What's left? Got milk, got meaning. That's the third thing. So I want to say a couple of things. One is, okay, so this study came across my screen here recently. It's so this guy named Calhoun, some of you might know about this study. It started in the 60s and he did it all the way into the 90s. He put mice in cages and he gave them enough food, and the population grew and grew and grew, and they were thriving. And then slowly, when it got to a certain amount, there was a certain number, I don't really remember what it is, but slowly things started to happen. They started to have less sex. There was plenty of room. There was more room for people. And they started to, which, you know, that was the most noticeable thing. There was less sex. And at the Braveheart experience afterwards, one of these guys said, "This is the most powerful experience I've ever had in my life. And I've had sex before." I thought that was pretty good. That was the best review we've ever gotten. But yeah, when a population, when you see that start to atrophy, and apparently he studied this a lot, Calhoun, and found that slowly there's only a few people having sex, and then there was only the superior ones were having sex anymore. So then there was dying off and cannibalism, and all the entire community began to die, and it was the end of the population. And actually, the study has mostly been used to point to overpopulation. But the most interesting piece in there is the mentioning that he found later in his studies is that there was a lack of meaning. Now, I don't know how much mice need meaning in their life, but every being needs purpose. There was a lack of purpose. There wasn't a place for everybody to bring a sense of purpose and meaning, or if it's not meaning for mice, it certainly is for us. I think it's an essential part of healing from addiction and trauma. We've got, after we put that stuff in our bodies and do that counterfeit medication for long enough, we're carving out a hole in our soul. The same thing with being on the trajectory that's not our own authentic path for a long time because of our trauma. We are carving out a hole in our soul, and it's a giant one. When we remove the medication and we start to not be run by those messages of the trauma, who are we? If we don't fill it back up with something authentic, my buddy Walt Stewart says, if I'm not creating, I'll be destroying. And the last little piece I want to say before we go on here is Father Bill Wigmore. He's anybody that's in Central Texas knows this guy. He's been clinical director and executive director of many treatment centers. I overheard him with a guy one time. The guy was saying, "I stopped going to meetings. I didn't call my sponsor. That's where I relapsed." And he said, "Bullshit," which was shocking. Father Bill saying bullshit in itself. But what came next was, what happened was you didn't find something that was meaningful for you in your life. So I think I'm making the point that we as treatment professionals probably need to put some emphasis on that. Arrest the disease, heal the trauma, and find some passion, something passionate to do in this life. So I wrote a book about this, by the way, just by coincidence. I happen to have written a book about this. It's a 10-week program of finding emotional integrity, emotional juice, and emotional and creative health. There's lots of exercises in there that I have extracted and used in treatment and used with many different groups. So I think you can get that on Amazon, or if you can't afford it, I'll send you one. Just let us know you want it. I don't think it's overpriced. I think it's like $13, $14. Let's see. So the Creative Fire. All right. So I want to try something with you guys, you folks, on this topic of finding our bliss. So where is it? Follow your bliss is a probably overused thing by Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. The full quote is, follow your bliss and doors will open that you didn't even know were there. And so I'd like to give you guys, you folks, the opportunity here. So where is my bliss? What is my bliss? That's a question I get from a lot of folks. And one of the things is things that have kept, if you're looking for it, what things that have kept me up all night working on something. For me, it's music and theater and that kind of. I've stayed up all night. I can't believe it's 4 a.m. writing a book or writing lyrics. So I would like to do a little visualization here. Because here's the other thing. The other way to find out what my bliss is try to get back to my emotional state before all of this stuff happened, right? Before, when we come into the world, at least in my day, I'm old enough where I think I probably got spanked when I came out. I don't think that's done anymore, right? I don't think we're literally hitting kids when they come out, but I think we're hitting them with expectations and a variety of other intrusions. And if we can get back to that place before the intrusions started, whether they were intentional or not, maybe we got a chance to find out what our true trajectory is. So I'm going to ask you guys to take a few breaths. Long, slow, deep breaths, at least 3 right now. Played a little music in the background. I hope it's not. If you can just sink into the sound and to your breath. And if you can close your eyes, or you can look at the image on the screen, whatever works for you. Take a few more breaths. I want you to feel your body becoming a little lighter. A little bit lighter. You're still breathing. You can feel yourself floating upward. In your mind's eye, just imagine yourself floating upward above yourself, above your house, above the place that you're in. And you begin floating in a particular direction. Floating, floating until you see a forest below you. And you begin to descend into a clearing in the forest. You look around and there's a clearing that leads into the forest, and you walk in there and it becomes darker and darker until the earth below you falls and you're falling. It's not a scary fall, it's just a falling. Allow yourself to fall, and gently you are caught by the earth below. You look up and you see a pinpoint of light ahead, and you move toward it. And as you walk toward that pinpoint of light, you find yourself at the entrance, the exit, the entrance of a cave. And you look out ahead of you, and you see a beautiful valley in the sunshine. You step out into the sunshine and you feel the breeze. Maybe you smell the flowers. You begin to walk down into the valley. And as you walk down into the valley, you see ahead of you a small figure, a person. As you get closer, you see that it's a child. It's a small child. And as you get closer, you realize that this is you when you were small. Maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You go up to the child and just make some eye contact. Maybe you kneel down, say hello. And maybe you haven't been here in a while. Maybe there's a little lack of trust at first, and maybe you say, hey, I'm here. And you ask this small person, what do you need? What is your deepest need? And you listen very carefully, and this small one says, I need love. I need your love. And you say, of course, you have my love. I'm here. You have my love. And then you ask this small one, what is your very deepest need? What is most important to you? What is your deepest need? And you listen very carefully. And you remember it well. And I'm asking you all to take a big deep breath right now. And this small one will always be there inside of you. You can always come back to this place. But for now, take a breath and let go of this moment. And begin your walk back up to the cave. And you walk up the hill into the cave, up through into the forest, across the field, up into the sky, floating back toward this place, toward the place that you're in. You begin floating downward and you feel the chair below you or wherever you are. You feel yourself in your body. Maybe wiggle your toes and hands and move around a little bit. And take a few breaths and take a moment to come on back. So for those of you that took that journey, thank you for indulging and breathe right now. And what I'd like to ask you to do, this is a little bit of an exploration of our bliss. That little one knows where we're supposed to be and where we're going. I'm going to ask you to change whatever you heard from that small one into an affirmation. And for me, my little boy wants to play. That's what's most important. I want play and peace. And so that's my affirmation. I am playful and peaceful. And it might sound a little corny to some of you folks, but I put this stuff on my mirror. I do all of that stuff they make fun of on Saturday Night Live because it works. If it comes out of a place of my healing, it works. If it's just coming out of some intellectual exercise, it's different. But if it comes out of a place of emotional healing, I have found that actually changes the way that I live my life toward my authentic self. So I'm asking you to go ahead and make an affirmation. Mine is, I am playful and peaceful. I'm asking you to put a few of them in the chat section. And Nicole, if you'd be willing to read some of those.
Yes. So I am sober. I am good enough. I am a people person who enjoys serenity. I am love. I am wanted and belong. I am worthy. I am playful and safe. I am fun and excited. I am loving and kind. I am needed. I am engaged and creative. I am safe and worthy. I am safe and I am loved. I am trying. I am strong and beautiful. I am safe and loved. I am held. I am safe. I am me. I am whole, healthy, sane, and safe. I am free to explore. I am serene. I am enough. I am powerful. I am courageous. I am loved and accepted as I am. I am happy and sharing and love to dance. I am strength. I am whole. God loves me. I am worthy. I have direction, purpose, and meaning. I am loved and appreciated. I am playful, peaceful, fun. I'm at peace. I am loved. I am human. I am peace. I am perfect in Jesus. I am good enough. I am calm and loved. I am understood. I am clean. I am sincere. I have purpose. I am enough. My happy place has been expanded. I am perfect exactly as I am. I am. I am seen and heard. I am loved. I am valued. I am loved. I am at peace. I am noticed. Kind and loving. I am safe and powerful. I am floating free of stress. I'm healthy, safe, and loved. I'm worthy and deserving. I'm loving and sharing, and I belong. I'm spiritually and wonderfully made. I am loved and seen and acknowledged. I am satisfied. I am creative. I am content. I love and accept myself unconditionally. I am a rascal. I am free from the madness of addiction. The sun shines within me. I am all I am supposed to be. I am perfectly imperfect. I am playful and fun. I am blessed. I am humorous. I am not alone. I am kind and respectful. I am worthy. My best is always enough. I am not alone. I am who I am. I am. I am honest. I am a strong warrior. I am mindful. I am fair. I am just. I am powerful. I am calm. I am peace and serenity. I am an overcomer of trauma. I am grateful. I am lovable. I am, and it is what it is. I am wanted. I am who I am.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow, that's powerful. Everybody take another breath if you want to. I do. And I want you to consider putting that somewhere so that you can see it. And then the question would be, am I living my life that way? And if not, there's probably some work to be done. And wow, that was powerful for me. I'm going to take a few of those myself. Can I borrow a few of those affirmations? Powerful stuff. Thank you. We're going to go to the question and answer, but I want to say to Donna Bryan, will you please email me? I want to respond to that after I get to sit with that. Also Cynthia Myers-Morrison suggests checking out foodaddictioninstitute.org. Cynthia knows the disease of food addiction deeply and is suggesting that. All right. So I think we're moving toward the, if you folks have comments or questions remaining. I don't think I have, I'm trying to find the chat, but if you guys would go to, I can see the question and answer. If you guys would put your questions in there, we have a few more minutes for you to either say truths or ask questions, either one. Or if you're seeing something I can't, Nicole, let me know.
I'll let you know. LD is saying, so glad you spoke about food and sugar addiction. There's not enough, it's not out there enough.
Yeah, it's not. Food and love addiction may be killing more people than any of it. That's, that's, I don't have the absolute data on that, but I know that, that at least food addiction is, and there is help. All major cities, Food Addicts, FA is the main program that is actually treating food addiction boldly. Now, it's not for everybody. I mean, you got to do some stuff, but it's powerful, powerful work. I think it's foodaddicts.org.
Someone here is asking about where we are, how long the program is. I will send over that information. When we do that in 24 hours, that email that's going to go out, we'll update you all with that information.
Yeah. So somebody's asking, tell us about Deep Water's Anchor. I'm not sure what is meant, Robert, by Anchor, but the Deep Waters recovery program is based on everything that I've talked about today. Right now it's a 10-hour program. One of the groups is on trauma resolution. One is on 12-step recovery immersion, and the other one is on launching your life into meaning, or bringing it further into meaning. And it also includes an individual session. That's what's happening right now. The Braveheart experience, which is part of the Creative Life Institute and is also facilitated at the Last Resort Treatment Center. That's for men only. And that happens once a month. Once we get past this thing, outside people, men can come and really up their recovery by attending this thing. There's quite a few people on here that have been through that. I know that that are on this webinar. And Deep Waters Intensive by early or in the fall of this year is the next planned Deep Waters Intensive. That's for men and women. That's what I can say about that. All right. What else we got, Nicole? Anything?
Let's see.
In your introduction to the program, you mentioned the importance of building rapport with clients. Any tips you would like to share about this, particular clients who have difficulty engaging or trusting the process? Okay, that is one thing. I do a whole thing on a whole workshop on the short version is we need to do our own work. That's it. And I think, like in 12-step recovery, there's a movement now of outing ourselves that we're in recovery. I think it's okay to do that. A lot of us therapists have been told, don't share anything personal. It's, you're going to create some guy. I don't know about that. But now here's the rule. This is a good rule that one of my mentors a long time ago taught me. Here's the rule about sharing our own stuff. This is my response to building rapport with clients. My own experience, strength, and hope is probably the best way. And then holding space for them. And but here's the rule. I don't share stuff about my personal life that I haven't worked on a lot, right? That I'm still really shaky about. That's not useful. And then it can be a little bit not that therapeutic, not that healing, right? So that's my answer to how to build rapport. Be real. Do the work to get real, and then be real with your clients, and then trust the process. I've always found it interesting that on the 600-pound life show, almost all the patients have experienced abuse as a child. To hear you talk about food addiction reminded me of that. It's food is a sedative. I do not train folks in psychodrama. I recommend Katrina Hart, Katrina in Dallas. Superstar. And she's a bioenergetics person too. Lots of food. There are lots of recovery programs for food addiction, not just FA. Great resources on foodaddictioninstitute.org. I am a food addict, and I'm a food addiction counselor. That's Judith Wolf. Put that in there. And yes, there are other programs. I've tried most of them, and for food addicts like me, it takes the more rigid version, which is FA. But there are folks that have recovered in other programs. I don't care where it is. We got to start talking about it. I don't care what program. Thank you for that comment, Judith. All right, where are we? Are we there? Dave?
Yep, we're about there. Yep, we're going up on 2 o'clock our time. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you guys sufficiently tired of hearing my voice, or is there anything else anybody wants to say? Or all right. So here's our here's how to get in touch with us. Again, Deep Waters Recovery programs is it resembles an outpatient, an IOP. We call it an advanced IOP. That might be a little bit grandiose. I don't know, but I think we're doing some work that some other IOPs aren't doing. But I guess everybody says that we're the best, right? Isn't that what we say, Dave? Really appreciate you guys hanging in there with us today. Please reach out. This is actually what's on the screen right now is my email address and my phone number. Deepwatersrecovery.com is where you can go to that website, and that's where our podcast is too. The podcast, The Recovery Crew, is on all of the podcast platforms, but you can also get to it through our website. Is there other contact stuff we need to put out there, Nicole? I think that admin at admin at Deep Waters Recovery gets to Nicole. And in terms of getting in the program, the Deep Waters program, which is launching online here, the groups are forming right now. The admin at deepwatersrecovery.com is the best contact for that. But you can just email me as well. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything else to say. Appreciate you guys. Please reach out and get on our mailing list, and enough's enough. Thank you.